Give the presentation.
Thank you. All right, hello everyone. Glad to see so many Strapi enjoyers joining us both on site and online on the stream. My name is Dominik Juriga. I am the tech lead of the Strapi team over here at Notum. We are developing Strapi-centric solutions to our clients, whether it's a simple page builder website or a large-scale tournament manager with almost every tournament system in the universe developed in Strapi. So that's really nice. And beyond Notum, if you manage to catch me afterwards, I like to talk about coffee, cycling, 3D printers, and basically any technology. So we can catch up later after the presentation. All right, I'm going to start with the agenda for today. We are basically going to be talking about things that have already been sort of brushed on, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what it actually means for the developers of Strapi. So first we are going to be talking about Vite, how it impacts the developer experience and how it's going to make your life a little bit easier. Then we are going to talk about TypeScript. Finally, we've got full TypeScript support, which is native, so that's awesome. Then we are going to be talking about the plugins, which have already been mentioned multiple times. Then something a little about how the entity service is changing into documents. And finally, I've said the best for last, we are going to be talking about the flattened API responses from the API. So, Vite. Many of you probably know Vite from working with your front-end frameworks, mainly probably from Vue and lately also from React. So in Strapi V5, Vite is going to be the default bundler for Strapi applications. This means that you can benefit on the front end of Strapi with hot modular placements, which is going to be awesome if you are working with the design system, plugins, and so on, which also rely on updates to the front end of Strapi. And also the total build size of the applications is going to be reduced. So realistically, we are talking about approximately 15% reduction in build time and also 15% reduction in build sizes, which may not sound as much, but if you have a larger application, this is going to be really nice as a developer, especially if you are not on the latest hardware. Then we also have some features which are for the future. So there are some features in Vite that are not available yet, such as the environments, which are going to provide a platform for you to separate the concerns of the server and the front end, which is going to be nice. And Strapi has basically enabled itself to use this feature in the future. And also, the world is basically moving into modular world, if I say so. And yeah, so Vite is great with ES modules. We are basically slowly moving from the common JS ecosystem into a modular world, which is going to be, we are going to be able to utilize this in Strapi to further enhance the performance of the applications. But you don't need to worry, Webpack is not going away just yet. It's also going to be supported in V5. So if you have existing custom configs and so on, you are going to be just fine with using Webpack. So the bottom line of Vite, it works as advertised. The gains are not really too big, too small. It's working just right, and you are better for the future. All right. Now, TypeScript. Finally, Strapi has been rewritten from ground up in TypeScript. This was one of my biggest pet peeves with V4, that the core code was written in JavaScript and then they basically slapped TypeScript just a little bit so that you can get a taste of what's going to be in V5, but not full implementation. So this has been completely rewritten and we are going to enjoy it so much so that we do not get any more runtime errors from lazy pull request reviewers. So, as I said, this is not a surface level, this has been a complete rewrite with the embracement for TypeScript. This basically builds on the foundational work which has been laid before, but it's been a lot more polished. So you do not need to use janky imports from the dist build folder, which is going to crash on the production and so on. Everything is now in the Strapi namespace, which can be extended and modified to your liking. Another key improvements in terms of TypeScript is that now you are finally going to be able to use these types natively in your front-end applications. So for example, if you have a monorepo where you have a front-end and the Strapi backend, you are going to be able to utilize these types directly in the front-end. It has been sort of working with V4, but there was the issue that relational types didn't really work due to the data and attribute wrappers, which caused all sorts of issues. So that should be solved in the V5. So the bottom line, a happy IntelliSense means a happy developer. You get all the types and everything, so you can be more productive, and the V5 delivers smoother experience on all fronts. Plugins. We've talked about plugins a lot. Also, Pierre mentioned plugins, and developing them is much easier than ever before. Before, if you wanted to implement a plugin, you needed a Strapi instance, then you needed to import the plugin, and basically every time you change something, you needed to stop the application, build the Strapi application, launch the dev server, and then you could finally test that your changes didn't work. So that's basically something that's going away. They've developed a new SDK, which you can use to start a watch of the plugin. You can verify that the plugin is fit for publishing, either on NPM repository or also on the Strapi marketplace, if that's what you're going for. Yeah, now I know that every developer loves TLAs, the three-letter acronyms. We've got plenty of them. So we've got the CLA, we've got the SDK in plugins. So you basically use the CLI to model content and create interactions with your content. So you can create the controllers, the services, the lifecycles, and so on. And you are going to use the SDK more towards the publishing side of things. And you can also, actually, which is new to Strapi V5, you can develop the plugins without actually having a Strapi instance running. So they've positioned themselves such that each plugin is basically a mini Strapi instance. So you can develop them independently. You don't need a running Strapi instance at all. And migrating plugins to V5, if you have any V4 plugins, honestly, there is a migration tool, but I would say just bite the bullet and start anew and copy the logic that you need. I've heard people say that the documentation is not great. I would say that it's really great if you know how to search it. There is maybe a 5-page document on how to change everything that was deprecated in V4 to V5. I've actually done it. It's not a simple task, but it's manageable, and I think, as I've mentioned, the documentation is really great and the team is also very helpful. So if you listen to Ondra, they've got the Discord and forums and Reddit and everything, so they are definitely willing to help you. So the bottom line, developing and maintaining plugins is easier than before. It's just less of a hassle if that's what you do. Now, they've deprecated entity service and moved towards document service. This is somewhat of a complicated topic. They've mainly done it to enable the content history feature, which you've seen Pierre demo. And despite being agnostic in terms of use case, so like they do not want to position themselves as the best CMS for page builder, they are really trying to be agnostic here. But I would say that it is still a content management history at heart, so putting the emphasis on content. And versioning of history is a natural development for a CMS. It's not easy to design, believe us, we've tried, failed many times and fixed it. but we are happy that it's finally off our shoulders and Strapi team is carrying it for us. One important thing to note, it is not opt-in in V5, it is enabled by default on all content types that you are going to model. So there's that. If you are a cloud user, this is not an issue. You do not need to worry because the limits of your Strapi cloud are going to be counted on documents, not the version history counts. So 10 versions of a document is still increases your limit by 1, so no worries there. Then they've simplified the database, so now if you are modeling content, let's say you've created a collection which is draft and publish enabled, so you would now have a published at column. And if you didn't use draft and publish, there would be no published at column. Similar for localization, if you are using it, the column would be there. If not, it wouldn't be there. Now it's enabled for all to simplify the database and to simplify the logic. And the document service, which is completely new, works as you would expect. So if you are used to using entity service, you would feel right at home until you don't. If you use the find one, find many, and so on, you would expect that natively the logic would be that you would want the published content to be returned, but for some reason Strapi decided that you are going to get the drafts by default. So if you want to get the published results, you are going to have to specify a filter. And then there are some new methods that you can utilize. So there are publish, unpublish, find first, and discard draft, which is something that you could already do via the API, but this just simplifies it for you. Yeah, and you can also unpublish or publish content within the status attribute. Before that, you would have to use the published attribute and set it to null if you wanted to unpublish, and it was cumbersome and not really straightforward. So the bottom line, I'm not sure about it just yet. I didn't get too much experience with V5-based projects. So we are going to have to see and each examine the use case that we have. And finally, I've left the best for last. Based on a recent survey on a sample size of 1, which was me, I can proudly say that the best feature in V5, I cannot believe that this is happening, guys, is that the team at Strapi has simplified the API response. So we are no longer going to have pull requests such as this. Having to use the .hell of attributes that are not required. This was my favorite part. It made the types not work. It made such a long ass code. It just wasn't great. So I'm happy to see that they are going away from this. And this is basically what I would say, that Strapi team has finally realized that entities usually in the real world have attributes, which is natural to me. And we do not need to say that they have them. There's also the incremental adoption for your project. So if you do not want to update the front end to the new structure, you can just use the header, which you can see on the screen. It's the Strapi response format. You can specify that you want the V5, and you can update Strapi now and migrate the front end later if that's what you're going for. And finally, there are not going to be double standards, because what I found the most difficult with the entity service is that entity service returned the data without the attributes wrapper, while the API always returned it with the API wrapper. So if you had any custom endpoints, the types would not work and the structure would be completely different. Sure, you could use the transform response method, which is not documented anywhere in the documentation, but you could search the Strapi code and see for yourself. And yeah, that's basically everything from me. Thank you for your attention. And I'm going to answer questions, which I'm sure there will be plenty. first question.
You said that you had some experiences from with migrating from V4 to V5. Yes. What do you think is the most difficult obstacle on front-end part?
Do you mean front end of Strapi or the front end?
The front end of the application that you have.
So like Vue and React and so on?
Yes.
I don't think...
Is it a lot of work to do, or?
I don't think it is a lot of work to do, since you can just use the Strapi response format before and it's just going to stay the same. If you are talking about upgrading the admin interface of Strapi, is that what you are talking about?
No.
Well,
Is it really same since you are using document ID? They move to like unique strings and not really IDs as you are normally using in V4 and 3.
okay, so the question was, I am just going to reply since I didn't give the microphone to our beautiful colleague here. It was an expansion of the previous question, whether the response is going to be the same in terms of the document ID and so on. All right, so that will be one small change. I don't think that everybody is going to use the content history feature. But sure, the document ID is now going to be included in the responses. You can choose to use it, and I believe that you should choose to use it, because I don't believe that using the identifiers in the database is going to be correct anymore. So yeah, there's that. But I think that if you do not use the content history feature and you use the response header, it's going to be basically the same. Unless you enable the content history feature, which is going to break your entire front-end application, but it's fine. All right, another question.
What would you recommend to bigger clients having like V4 projects and now thinking about V5? Like, what is the next step? Like, is it to wait? Is it to get your feet wet a bit? Like, what is the thing you would recommend?
Yeah, so I will recommend them to contact a certified Strapi partner such as Notum. We've got plenty of experience. But in terms of development, I would say it is basically going to depend on how many plugins you use. There are plenty of plugins which are really useful, and basically I would say that some projects cannot do without them, which have not been migrated yet. So if you feel like it, you can basically migrate them for themselves and create a pull request. But if it's a simpler project, if it's like page builder or something, then I believe that you can use it right now. You can migrate to it. But if you have a reliance on a plugin which has not been migrated yet, then I would say that you just cannot use it right now. All right, many questions.
Okay, so have you had time to check how life cycles are working now, or what's your take on that? I think you need to use middlewares now or something like that. If you haven't had time, that's okay.
Yeah, I believe that I didn't have time, so that's answer to the first question. Yeah, I think that they've moved away from life cycles at all. I'm not sure if they've been completely deprecated, but I believe that they want to move people away, since they are quite useful, but they are not straightforward to follow. So like, you can have a life cycle which is reacting to changes in your content, but the developers may not even know that it's there, and then they are looking why there is a behavior which is not described in the controller. So you have to know that there is a lifecycle file somewhere in the content, and I think that there are better ways to implement this. So no, I didn't have the time to implement lifecycles yet, and I think that it's correct that they are moving away from it. I'm not sure if I'm going home today with all these questions.
Okay, so what about Strapi Cloud? Does it support both version 4 and 5, or how is the migration there?
Yeah, Strapi Cloud right now supports both versions, but they are strongly encouraging you to upgrade to V5, but you have to do it yourself. It's like they are going to provide assistance, you have access to support, but all the hard work is basically left up to you and to the mercy of developers of the plugins which you are using. Going to the back.
Okay, you maybe answered this question already, but I have to ask, if there is persisted the ID and the document ID, what are you using for the finding one, updating one, and so on?
Okay, so if you are using the document service, I think it's self-explanatory that you would use document ID. Right now it's...
For the API, I mean?
Yeah, also for the API, this applies to both. You are going to have to rely on the document ID. I don't believe that there is currently a native way to search for collections with the ID. You can still use the Strapi DB query tool to search for IDs, but I don't believe that. I don't think you can even filter for IDs.
Another question, you can filter by ID.
I don't think you can filter by IDs. You have to use the DB query utility. Another question in the back.
Hello, Domo. I have a question about TypeScript and how like TypeScript works internally between services and controllers. Because usually now in V4 you write like Strapi service its name and then call function without any TypeScript support. Like you can call anything. And do you know how it works in V5?
I am pleased to say it works great. So since it's now natively supported, the types are everywhere, even in the controllers, the services. So you even get the context of the request typed, which is really cool. So now you do not have to second guess yourself every time you are doing a custom controller logic anywhere. Another question?
Okay. What about the transferring or sharing the types between the backend and the frontend?
I believe I've talked about this. It's working great. It was working before in V4. However, anytime you needed to get a type of a relation, the types will just fall apart. And now with the new structure that you do not have the attributes wrapper, it should be working fine. I've tested it on two relations, and that's something I didn't mention, and also Pierre didn't mention, which I'm kind of curious about. If you've ever wanted to nest content more than 2 layers deep, you couldn't, but now supposedly it's up to 6 layers deep. So the types should be working also if you are nesting 6 layers deep into the content.
Maybe one more. Imagine that you are talking to a CEO who have not programmed for a while. How do you transfer the type between the backend and the front end? And even if you make some customizations to the return type.
Okay, very specific questions. How we do it, there are probably multiple ways, but we usually have a monorepo architecture. So this means that you can share the code between the application, and that's basically what we are doing. We are using the TypeScript utility of Strapi, which generates our types. And then we share it in the monorepo, which you can basically pull into your front end and use the contents that are automatically generated on every start of the application. So even if you change some attributes of a content type, you do not need to do any changes to the TypeScript. It just automatically updates it, and it will also crash your front-end builds if there are any changes and you are accessing attributes that are not already existing.
I have a question from the YouTube. You mentioned plugin migration. Is there a publication or a planned stream where I can see it?
Are you talking about our plugins? Is the question.
I think like general, also ours.
In general, it is completely up to the developers of the plugins. Many of the plugins that you will use in Strapi are maintained by people who do it for free, so I don't think it's fair to ask them to migrate it straight away. If it's a Strapi plugin, I believe if it's not already migrated, it's being worked on, and Notum plugins are being worked on. The record locking plugin has been migrated and is on pull request right now, and the location plugin is upcoming in October, I believe. Okay, another CEO question.
I'm going to use this opportunity to learn a lot. So, what about the documentation of the API? I remember that that was not the best thing at Strapi v4. Swagger.
Yeah, so the documentation has been a key point in all of the talks that we've had with the team over at Strapi. They are saying that they've worked on it so much, and I believe them. The V5 documentation has improved a lot and now contains references to the methods which we've had to search for in the repository for ages, but now they are included, so there are some improvements there. I don't think it's perfect. It's actually far from that. But if we are talking about the migration, the documentation has just been stellar. I mean, any issue that I needed fixed in terms of migrating the plugin, the answer is already there. And if it wasn't, it was my fault. So
I meant specifically API documentation. For example, Swagger or any other utility that we can use.
yeah, so the utilities are basically the same. The toolset has not changed. What's made the improvements to the documentation of the API is they made the structure more simple, which improved the documentation of the API. But the toolset is the same. It generates some JSON, which contains the open API documentation. This is still the same. All right, seems that there are no more questions. So once again, thank you for attention. And I see that there are still some drinks, so now I'm also going to have one. So see you on the next meetup. Thank you.
All right. So now I'm going to switch to different presentation with a little bit of help. Hej, ja to mám poznámky. All right. So, Dominik, thank you very much for the presentation. If you haven't already, I would love you to join our growing meetup community. Stay connected, get all the updates from us, see the future events, ongoing discussions, etc., etc. So, see you at the meetup. That's one thing. Another one, I say this all the time and never ever anybody reach to me, but if you want to be the next speaker on our next meetup, please reach out, and I mean that, really, please. We are always happy to have any speaker, even with no experience at all. So maybe next time the people who had questions today, I don't know, maybe. So we are very happy to have a speaker that is not from our company. All right, the feedback. Like I already said, and Gabcha gave me a hard time if I will not say this correctly. So please scan this and fill in the feedback.
Right now.
I'm not being pushy, but I will wait. I have time. Tony? Yeah, it's very anonymous. Yes. But feel free to put this feedback into the feedback form. And basically, I don't want to interrupt you. Captcha. People are actually feeling the feedback. Okay, and basically that was it. A huge thanks to everybody who will able to join us for today, both here and on the stream. I hope that you learned something and that you met new people. Stay connected. You can, how do you say it? You can subscribe us on the social networks. We have a lot of news about Strapi and our events and all the things. And I hope that I will see you next time. And I hope that you will not leave now, because still we have some things on the bar, and we can stay here until I think 10. And after that, if you want, you can join us. We are going to the city. We have a favorite bar there, so you can join us there. So thanks once again, everybody who joined us today and on the stream. And yes, as I already said, see you next time. And just maybe one more thing that I forgot to mention. But if you are interested in seeing more how to migrate specifically plugins, you can watch Strapi Partner stream on 5th November, where Dominik and Michelle will be showing how to do that. That's it.